Hello and welcome to You Don't Play Boxing, Mirror Fighting's influencer boxing podcast. Back after a brief break, I'm sure you all missed us. My name is Martin Dom, joined by Harry Davies and by Donna Corby. His final episode, not his final episode, but his final episode on the road, at least I believe. I've lost track of where he is and what time it is, and I suspect he has too. This week we are going to take a look back at the launch press conference for the prime card, Tommy Fury against KSI, Logan Paul against Dillon Danis. Harry was there. It was, as ever, eventful. Harry, let's get straight into it. Let's start with Dillon Danis. He turned up, he spoke, but Logan since then has sort of taken plenty of shots at him, so he didn't want to be there. They had to force him to do the face-off. What was your feeling about him? Because we all expect him not to turn up on the night, but what was your feeling about him on Tuesday?
Yeah, he was in good spirits. When I spoke to him, he came with a big team. He was sort of confused that he was doing media before the press conference. He thought it would be after the press conference. Luckily, it was before because he was taken out of the building after. But yeah, he was in good spirits. I know annoyed after the press conference, he's a bit annoyed because he sort of felt like all the numbers were against him. He said he couldn't take any drinks on stage. They were trying to give him prime and he didn't want that. And whereas Logan had all his props, he couldn't bring any props. So he sort of felt like the numbers were against him for this press conference, which I'm not surprised because at the end of the day, it's Misfits, KSI's promotion, Logan's his sidekick and whatnot. But I feel like he held his own in the sort of presser. I know people were weighing up this 2v2 thing. It was almost KSI and Logan against Dillon and Tommy, even though Dillon and Tommy actually have like no sort of relationship. It was quite strange. But Dillon held his own. I think he did a good job, even though we didn't get the face-off after. You look online and it's all 10-7 Dillon, 10-8 Dillon. Not many fans for Logan at the minute. So, yeah, I feel like it was Dillon's stock definitely went up after Tuesday.
I wish the fight was this weekend simply because we've got, the best part of 7 or 8 weeks to basically wait and see if he does turn up. Donna, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I don't think you were too confident. But any thoughts, feelings about what the fight looks like on the night if indeed Logan does take on Dillon Danis?
Yeah, I mean, look, it definitely is better. Like, it's looking better than the KSI one was in January. He showed up, he went to London. It appears that he's got the full backing of Conor McGregor this time around, which, he's not going to leave the setup. If Conor is really backing him, he's probably not going to pull out. And I think, Logan's the bigger guy. It's going to be tough. It would have been nice to see them face off. That would have been ideal. Instead, Logan faced off with Mike Perry, who's the backup opponent. But I think Dillon makes it tough, makes it awkward, and Logan certainly no Jake when it comes to the boxing skills. And I think he makes it tougher than people think. And I would have to imagine Logan's the favorite, and he should be able to hit him with a big shot and hurt him. I saw some sparring footage of Dillon's that's not out there during the week. While I'm in New York, where Dillon is from, it came across my desk, and he didn't look anything special, but he's still learning. And yeah, I think Logan probably should win, but it will be tougher than people will make it out to be. Certainly no Jake and Ben Askren type result.
So Mike Perry's definitely a backup fighter, is that right? Because it was, if I'm not mistaken, supposed to be Hassan Rahman Jr., or was that just wrong?
Yeah, well, Mike Perry is the backup opponent. He was there. He faced off with Logan. They've done all the promotion in case of if Dillon doesn't show up, they'll be ready with their face-off video, with their press conference stuff, all of that with Mike Perry. I think that sometimes Hassim works with Keemstar and with Happy Punch Promotions. And I think sometimes Keem will put something out there because he wants it to be true more than necessarily that it is. Hassim, he might fight AJ, except Eddie Hearn said not even close. And then, Hassim's going to be the replacement for Logan. And I thought, he's going to make 195. That's pretty cool for a fight that may or may not happen. That's surprising given the whole thing with Jake last summer. So, I guess they would have liked him to be the replacement. But no, Mike Perry is in fact the replacement opponent.
And another man who, unsurprisingly took centre stage, Harry, John Fury, never passes up the opportunity to get himself in the headlines. Sometimes press conferences, face-offs do need a little bit of something else. I'm not sure this was really the time for him to get involved, but entertaining nonetheless.
Yeah, well, I know Donna had some bad luck with his camera at the Mayweather John Gotti fight. I almost had the same because I almost had a microphone go straight into the lens when he threw us off the stage. It was a couple of inches away, and I thought, "Oh my God, Martin's not going to be happy when I say I've got no footage left." But thankfully, it was okay. So yeah, I don't think anyone really expected it. I actually looked from the time the fighters came on the stage to when it finished. It was only about 15 minutes. So John really must have either not been happy that he wasn't getting attention or not been happy at what was being said because yeah, sort of everyone turned their heads when they heard a big bang, and then the table comes over, and he kicks the other one, and then it's just pandemonium. Yeah, it was mad, but it was what it was needed because at certain times it was getting about family, and everyone was talking over each other, and it's never good when you can't even hear anything anyone's saying. So John sort of just got up and screamed, and then yeah, it ended the way it did, which was everyone could say it maybe crossed the line, but we've had this conversation a lot of times. There really is no line in this game, so. It was entertaining to say the least. Annoying that we didn't get the Dillon one, but maybe because of that. I know I saw him pick up a few chairs, and he was told by security that he's going to get arrested if the chair leaves his hand. So thankfully that didn't happen. But yeah, John Fury steals the show. Who would have predicted that one?
Well, someone was asking me, like, why was John so annoyed? And I said, well, the camera wasn't on him for 2 seconds. That's got to annoy him.
I tell you what, he's a man who loves the camera, and he's certainly, he's made the most of. I don't even know when it started, but there's no doubt at some point in the last few years, a light bulb went off in his head and thought, hang on, Tyson's making money, Tyson's making headlines, Tommy's doing the same. It's about time I got involved. He's got some sponsorship. I know you've spoken to him before, Harry, through that. And listen, he's great. He's great content. And I think if you, again, we're hoping that everything stays intact between now and October 14th. But if you look at that fight week, unlikely that maybe Tyson might not be there. It depends how seriously he's taking his own fight. But you've got John Fury, you've got Conor McGregor, you've got the 4 fighters. Presumably Mike Perry will turn up regardless and hang around, so he could be there. We haven't touched on the undercard. You've got the teams and the entourages. I'm not sure Manchester's ready.
Yeah, the weird thing is with John is at moments before that sort of whole thing happened, he was like, "Look, let's stop with this personal stuff. Let's just talk about real boxing, how X is going to beat Y." And then seconds later, the whole stage is gone. So it's really weird because everyone knows the whole real fighting man thing, but he's almost known for, like at the Jake fight, takes his top off the Tommy fight, takes his top off in the ring and starts screaming at Jake. And it's really weird because, like I said, one side you've got this part of him which is like the traditional boxing values, just wants to talk about the sort of fight game, and then he all of his antics would suggest otherwise. But I think that's why sort of people love him, right? Yeah, on the fight week in Manchester, if it's anything like that press conference, then yeah, we certainly won't be ready.
We need some sort of insurance for you and or your kit, that's for sure. I wouldn't say which one's more important. Anything else from the press conference that stood out? Anything that, we don't want to get into these things too much and start scoring them, but anything else that stood out that you thought was significant?
Well, yeah, the props was good. I know Logan brought the cake on of Dillon getting choked out by that bouncer, and he actually also had the bouncer hired a security there. Dillon brought the hat out from Logan's very controversial video in Japan. So there were some sort of good trash talk moments, but obviously the moment will be John flipping over everything. That sort of overshadows everything. And yeah, the interviews that Tommy did after the press conference and Logan KSI did. Tommy was saying he's got no respect for KSI. He respects everyone that gets through the ring, but even though KSI is hopefully going to get through the ring with him, he doesn't respect him. Just says he's blown up middleweight and he's going to get through him easily. Logan and KSI not really talking much about the fights in their interviews, but yeah, it was just a crazy event, and like you said, it's almost unfortunate that it's 2 months away, because if this was happening in a couple of weeks and they could sort of keep this buzz going for it, it would be massive. I still think it will be massive if all the fights come together, but they need something like this, during the fight week and to almost one up what just happened,
Yeah, definitely. It's unfortunate, I suppose, that Logan and Dillon are in the States, but maybe they can do something there, and likewise with Tommy and KSI, and keep the interest. But they're probably fortunate enough that there are not too many fights in boxing in general between now and middle of October. We've got Daniel Dubois this weekend, you've got Canelo in September, but a lot of, certainly from our point of view, a lot of interest in this fight, and we're just hoping it stays intact. One thing I wanted to talk about was the number of rounds. I think I'm right in saying KSI and Tommy Fury is over 6 rounds, but Logan Paul and Dillon Danis is over 8 rounds. KSI understandably coming under some fire for, fighting over 6. Jake fought Tommy over 8. Any thoughts, Donna, on why it's 6?
Look, first off, I thought it was kind of cool that Dillon kind of just quietly accepted that 8-round thing against Logan. That was like, I know this isn't an answer necessarily to your question, but Dillon's kind of winning the build-up with Logan at the moment, it would seem. The constant social media stuff with the wife and everything, or the fiance and everything, and now, he like, Logan's big thing was, well, you wouldn't do an 8-rounder, and Dillon ducked us, and then just all of a sudden it's kind of quietly put out there by Callis Ireland that, well, this fight's going to be 8 rounds. So it's kind of cool from Dillon, but I think that I don't know. I mean, there's a whole thing, like KSI's coach was on Fred's channel, Fred Beck, and he was saying, like, it's like something about how, well, we just said yes to everything Tommy wanted. It's like, okay, well, Tommy probably didn't want 6 rounds. Like, he's moving up the ranks. He just did an 8-rounder. He's done a couple of 8-rounders. I think the one with Bocianski, was that an 8-rounder or did he do 6? I'm not sure, but he's moving that direction. It's very strange for a boxer to do an 8-rounder and then go, well, actually, no, I'm going to go back and do 6 now next. So I think that's kind of strange. And we've never seen KSI over 8. In this comeback, we haven't seen him over any more than 1 or 2, really. So I think we don't know for sure, but it definitely seems like that would be a KSI decision. And it is a little bit disappointing. And I know that Miles Taylor has kind of said that they prefer the fights to be as short as possible. They think that the explosiveness and the action is better if these fights, like, they've put on 3-rounders before, they've put on fights with 1-minute rounds, so they've put on all sorts of stuff. So I think that they just want excitement and people looking for knockouts. But yeah, it's a bit of a story, like that KSI didn't appear to want the 8 rounds, because Jake is moving up the ranks even further. He did 10 in his last one, so it's another strange little thing. So it'll be interesting to see how it impacts it if they do end up going further than 4 or 5.
I wanted to touch, when I spoke to Tommy about that, he was a bit annoyed, and he felt like it shows that KSI is not as confident as he should be, because everyone makes these comparisons with Jake, and I know they've sort of got different goals. Jake wants to become a world champion, whereas KSI has not really shown that long-term commitment to the sport. But you'd think, you'd want to increase the rounds. And Tommy said the same thing. Why am I going 8 rounds against Jake and I'm having a backstep? It would make sense to either do the same, right? Or even go 10, but that's not going to happen. But you want to do the 8 rounds. And I feel like, yeah, it's a weird one with KSI. Maybe it is because he's not got those long-term goals in the sport. A lot of people have said, look, like Donna said there, he's only been a couple rounds his last fight. The longer it goes could definitely be a bad thing for him. So the fact that if it's only 6 and it does go the distance, it's a big step up for his last fights anyway. He's only been 2 or 3, so going 6, let alone 8, is big for him. But Tommy will be used to that. It's 2 less than his last fight, so I'm sure he would have wanted the extra 2, but he said anyway that it's going to be over in 2, so it doesn't really matter for him in that sense.
I mean, that's the thing. If we're being cynical, then it's fairly simple math. If it's 6 instead of 8, it gives either man, but certainly KSI, more chance of hearing the final bell if he is to lose. And if he loses on points, then it gives him an easy way to compare himself with Jake Paul. I know it was a split decision with Jake, but regardless, and it also gives you an opportunity to complain about the judging and everything else, hometown decision, whereas a knockout is obviously pretty conclusive. But maybe I'm just being too cynical. And to be honest, I don't think any of us think it goes 6 rounds?
The only issue is, like, Tommy doesn't stop people, right? He's not a power puncher. He hasn't stopped anyone in years. So, 2021 was the last one. So he's not a big knockout puncher. So yeah, I think that if JJ can survive, the problem, this is what the 6 rounds benefits him, because 8 rounds is very difficult, and if you've never done it before, to do it against someone like Tommy, who's better than you technically in almost every aspect, it's going to be tough. You'd probably want to make that move up against someone who maybe you're going to be the hammer instead of the nail against. So I think it does, it's a clear benefit for KSI. But no, I like it. I mean, it is just a weird, it's a weird matchup. I've been talking to people about this a lot, on this trip. It's not the people won't want to hear this, but it's not the most compelling like matchup as a fight. Like Jake and Tommy was a real like we don't know what's gonna happen. Tommy should win, but he's got the problem under the lights, and Jake's got the power, and he's knocked everyone out or knocked everyone down, and he had just beaten Anderson Silva, who's bigger than him, all this stuff. So there was, and Tommy had pulled out of the few fights, so there was like a story, and that's why it did so well on pay-per-view, was because genuinely we needed to know what kind of happens. There's kind of a consensus that Jake is the number one and KSI is the number two. So the idea that like Tommy already beat the best guy, and now he's going and fighting the second best guy over less rounds in kind of a matchup that's kind of thrown together. I don't know. Can you feel that it's a little bit less of a like compelling matchup than Jake was?
I think, yeah, I agree with that. And like you said with the rounds too, I think the fact that it's less is, I know a lot of people were thinking this won't go rounds, but say KSI can go out there and win 1 or 2 rounds, and all of a sudden if it goes to the scorecards, you could be looking at some very interesting ones. Whereas if it goes 8 and KSI wins 2, it's pretty clear cut, right? So even if KSI does get 1 or 2 under his belt, you could be looking at a split decision or something, and it's not sort of viable to say that he might not win. So I know everyone's already sort of writing him off, but you never know what could happen. He gets a knockdown or something, and it all changes. Whereas an 8-rounder, I feel like Tommy would just sort of cruise to a win like he did against Jake. But less rounds, again, favors KSI in that sense. But yeah, not as compelling as the Tommy-Jake fight, just because of the whole almost 2-year back and forth, clashing at the first Woodley one, etc. And whereas this is not really, it literally is like Donna said, it's like, oh, you beat Jake, so now I'm going to try to beat you. There's not really been that history between them, and a lot of the consensus does say that Jake's sort of better than KSI, so it sort of doesn't really make a sense taking the back step to fight the second best guy in this influencer scene. So yeah, definitely less compelling, I think, in that sense, which again, most people might not want to hear, but still a good fight nevertheless.
I mean, Tommy Fury must be laughing all the way to the bank. I mean, we've spoken about this before. The alternative to him fighting influencers is fighting people nobody's ever heard of for presumably no money. He's no longer with Frank Warren, which, may not have happened if he hadn't fought Jake or whatever, but there was no indication that Tommy was going to go far in the professional game. He must be, having beaten Jake, which he did seem to have a lot of pressure on his shoulders in going into that fight. As you said, Donna pulled out a couple of times. He must just think, how have I managed to land a fight against someone who's worse than Jake Paul, who really has fought nobody, who hasn't been tested? He's loving it, surely.
Definitely, it's like he's as one of our friends Harry would say, he's had a touch. Like he's really, he's it's unbelievable. Like you say, he's not a particularly gifted boxer. I guess that's why KSI has a shot and why Jake had a shot. But he's obviously better than these guys, and we saw that. Like, I know it was a split decision in Saudi, and Jake got the knockdown towards the end, but it wasn't like necessarily that close of a fight. At least on the night, it didn't feel in there like Jake had won almost any of the rounds. And then, I think he goes in and he's got KSI. And then remember, there's a contractually obligated rematch for Jake, too. So he's got another one of these coming up next year. And then I'm sure if he beats KSI in any sort of way that isn't a decisive, vicious knockout, there could be a rematch for that, too. So he could get himself another one. And then Logan will want a piece after that. And, it builds. So he's got himself this one and then potentially as many as 3 more going forward. That'll take him a couple of years to get through. And look, he's a young father. And KSI kind of took a shot on Twitter the other day saying that they've got this £9 million fortune and most of it's made by Molly May. And I think he'll like, making multiple millions and supporting their daughter Bambi. And it's a fantastic grift he's got going.
I think the interesting thing with that is, I remember before the Jake fight, he was sort of just saying, yeah, this is a one-off. I'm going to beat Jake, then go back to my goal of becoming a world champion. And now, like Donna said, he's got all these sort of fights on the table. And when I spoke to John, I was like, oh, is this going to be the KSI fight? And then he's back to, traditional boxing. John was like, no, I don't think so. And laid out all the fights that Donna just laid out there for Tommy. And was sort of explaining it. He was like, look, this stage, like you said, Martin, traditional boxing for Tommy doesn't make any money. So, and he's still young. He could go on and have, a couple more years and then go to the digital thing and push himself for a world title shot. But at this stage, he's not going to make anywhere near the money that he's making for these fights. So you can blame him for and as again, people were writing KSI off in this, so it's almost like, God, Tommy's going to back himself 1,000,000%. He said to me the other day, so why wouldn't he go and take these sort of easy fights, as you'd say them now, and then just go back to the traditional where, I mean, obviously a lot of people have their opinions on whether he can ever challenge for a world title, but they certainly don't write him off against these YouTubers. So, fair play to him for making the money, and we'll see how this next one goes.
He certainly wanted no part of Vidal Riley. When people were asking about that at your call the other day, he had no interest, didn't want to know about it, and I think with good reason. I think Vidal would win that one pretty comfortably.
Any news on potential undercard fights? I know, well, it looks like Blueface was stabbed in the gym this week, so I suspect that rules him out of a potential fight. Any news on what we can expect?
Yeah, so we're looking at a fairly packed undercard. Alexia Grace and Astrid Wett's fight will probably be on there. That was a massive hitter, over 1 million views on the alleged fight that was going to happen in the gym in London. So that'll be on the undercard. Tremendous promotion for that. Completely different audience to the two fights they've already got. Salt Papi will fight someone. It was going to be Blueface. It was going to be Slim. We all know about that. We talked about that in the last episode. Then Blueface injury. They just aren't going to give it to Ashley Tebby from Raksu. So I don't know what they're going to do in terms of an opponent. Maybe Slim slides back in. Maybe he kind of redeems himself and takes the fight this time. So there's a lot of time to get all that sorted. There's been a lot of chirping online between. Mike Perry is going to be there, and he called out Anthony Taylor. Anthony, who's also been talking to Le'Veon Bell online, the NFL linebacker. So there's going to be something involving Anthony Taylor, I'm sure. They have another card up on towards the end of September, like a smaller, like what they call like a fight night. If this is a UFC numbered event, then this will be a smaller fight night event in September with some good fighters on there, and I'm sure they'll have. It'll be an A-list kind of a card. Unfortunately for Harry and I, working it, every single fight's going to be very important, which is a lot of work on a fight week. But it's going to be for the viewers a tremendous card. I think there's going to be people pretty well on the prelims. These Happy Punch prelims are going to have relatively big names on there as well. People with millions of subscribers and people who you've seen before, all of that stuff. It's going to be very exciting for sure. And they're calling it the Super Bowl of influencer boxing, and I think that's probably accurate.
One final thing on KSI, moving away from that fight, Harry, you were at Anthony Joshua's win over Robert Helenius the other week. Conor McGregor was there because his new stout was part of the sponsorship package, and he called out KSI, which seemed to be quite strange, given that he's distanced himself frequently from fighting Jake Paul, which is the obvious fight, should I say, should McGregor ever decide to sort of come into this sphere. But a bit strange that he went for KSI.
Yeah, a bit strange that he couldn't box eggs if he worked in an egg boxing factory too, which for a lot of people were laughing at that line from McGregor line. But yeah, it was very strange. I sort of had nothing to do all night because the fights were pretty average. Even the Chisora one, where a lot of people were sort of like just waiting for the main event. And then the main event happens and AJ wins by knockout, drinks McGregor's stout, then McGregor calls out KSI, and it all goes on. So it's just a crazy finish to the card. But what he needed, because it was pretty lackluster, to be fair. But yeah, it was so strange because he called him out twice, I think. I mean, he goes in the ring, calls him out. I think he called him out when Gareth Davies spoke to him. And then there's this weird clip of sort of McGregor talking to KSI, and AJ's like, oh, no, that's my guy. And when I spoke to KSI about this the other day, he was, sort of welcoming the fight. Maybe he was even quite surprised because I know there was a lot of talk with McGregor and Jake, and now it's sort of flipped where it's McGregor and KSI. But does that happen? I don't know. We've been talking about McGregor's UFC return for the last 2 years, let alone his sort of change over to boxing. So, and I know he's sort of outlined his plan of having a couple more UFC fights before he goes back into that world. So who knows? But it was a strange one. I know people were comparing this video of McGregor and KSI playing FIFA together 6 years ago, and then 6 years later, he's calling for a fight with him. So, fair play to KSI. It shows how far he's come. People might look at it another way and say it shows how low McGregor's gone since winning 2 world titles. But Does it happen? Maybe in some crazy world it does, but I don't think for a while yet. I don't know. Donna's probably got a lot to say about that, because I know the fight with Jake and Conor was teased for ages, and Jake sort of ruled it out recently after he beat Nate. So it's strange world we're living in.
Yeah, I think it's a brief thing to touch on. Like, I mean, amazing for KSI. He's clearly like a superstar. He's, you know, beloved. He's got all these followers, and now Conor is pursuing him after Jake like relentlessly goes after Conor, and no interest, don't want to know, won't even say his name, and then he just calls out KSI multiple times. So look, I spoke to Mount Taylor, and he said, sure, once we beat Tommy, we'll go and take care of Conor McGregor. I don't know if either of those things are going to happen, though.
Unlikely. Just to finish this week, it was a couple of weeks ago, I think, but Donna was cage-side, ringside, for Bryce Hall's bare-knuckle boxing debut. Donna promised us that Bryce Hall would definitely lose. It was just a matter of how badly hurt he was. In the end, he won. So you've got some explaining to do, Donna.
Yeah, no, I was really selling. The whole thing was he proved me wrong on everything. I said, oh well, he's really unlikable, so it's gonna our audience will hate him. Turns out he's actually a really nice guy. He's doing all the stuff that he's supposed to. He's meeting the fans, all of that stuff. Doesn't do anything annoying all week, which wasn't great for our news lines. And then I go, well, he's going to get battered, though. He gets knocked down in the first 10 seconds and ends up winning. And there's really no drama at all. And, it proceeds to, just call out KSI, pretty standard. But no, he's tough, because he was getting smashed in that fight. He was losing. He had got the knockdown, so he'd won the first, but he was losing to G. Perez. Perez got himself injured, hyperextended his elbow. But Bryce, I mean, the numbers are hilarious. On the night they announced, we had around 800,000 viewers, and we're waiting to see what the Fubo numbers are. We're waiting to see what Fight TV are, but peak concurrent viewers of around 800,000. They'd given away the event for free to get signups for their app, and then the next day it's, well, actually, the Fubo numbers are in, it's 5 million. And then a couple of weeks later, we had 12 million viewers. It's like, gosh, 12 million. I mean, that's like Premier League. That's like, Man City versus QPR, Aguero type Premier League numbers. I don't know that they're, I don't know about that, but I believe if they're giving it away for free, there was clearly interest. It got, I think, around 5 million views on the YouTube channel when they uploaded it. So Bryce is, for better or worse, he's a big deal in the space. He was actually talking about fighting Deji on this card against on the KSI and Logan joint card, but the real reason is that he's got some lingering injuries. He had a cut and stitches and all of that. His reason to help push it is, well, me and Deji are too big to be on the undercard, and I don't want to promote Prime. I've got my own energy drink that I want to push and all of that stuff. But the actual real reason is, unfortunately, it maybe wasn't so graphic for everyone who was looking to see him get beat up, but he did have some niggling injuries in that fight. He was cut. He needed, I think, 10 or 12 stitches, and he's recovering from that. But he will fight again. He wants Austin McBroom. They're trying to set up Austin McBroom versus G. Perez. That would be funny if this Perez guy becomes like the gatekeeper for YouTubers going into bare knuckle. But it was unbelievable for Bryce, because there was no way he was going to win, and then he got the knockdown in the first few seconds. Then he was getting absolutely battered, and I don't think he landed another clean punch really after the knockdown. But Perez picked up the injury, doctors called it, and Bryce Hall is in the win column, and he's a fighter. He proved he's a fighter. He always claimed he was a fighter, so that's great.
Does it make sense for him to? It feels like it doesn't make too much sense for him to continue bare knuckle. Is this a good path into sort of going, back into the normal influencer boxing scene?
No, he's not going to continue bare knuckle. I think he's going to be involved in the promotion. I think he's involved pretty deeply with Triller and Ryan Kavanagh, who own BKFC. But and he might be involved in broadcasts. He might do promotional stuff, but he's not going to be fighting in bare knuckle ever again. It wasn't for him, I don't think. But he just wanted to do something that was a little bit different, that wasn't like this big, huge boxing event that he'd have to put on himself or, go to Misfits and do it all through that or anything like that. I think he wanted to try something that kind of grabs headlines, that kind of gets the attention from people and immediately catapults him into like, well, he's pretty tough. He beat like a legitimate 3-0 fighter. G. Perez is very legitimate, by the way, very serious fighter. Down 4 weight classes below Bryce, he's a serious fighter. I don't know about jumping up 30 pounds, but he's it was a great display. It was fantastic, theater and everything, and it's catapulted him right back into the discussion where, like, if he fights Deji, he is right in saying that he and Deji in London at maybe a smaller venue like the Copper Box or something is a massive event on its own. And he's clearly he's able to engage people. He was kind of explaining to people that, like, he'll do the crazy promotion with the pushing and the shoving when he's got someone who's like a good dance partner. And he was also, like, he was saying to me in the hotel behind the scenes, he was like, also, this is pretty serious. This isn't like YouTube boxing with like Austin McBroom and they're wearing 16-ounce gloves and some of them have headgear on and all this stuff. He's fighting a legitimate bare-knuckle boxer in bare-knuckle boxing in Albuquerque, all this stuff. It's very dangerous. It's a lot more dangerous than white-collar boxing. So, he was like, I'm not really here to like make a joke and have fun, which was unfortunate for us as reporters. But he's clearly back in the spotlight and put on a fantastic show. He gave the shout out to Andrew Tate. He walked out in the to the theme song. I know that's your friend Martin, your close personal pal, King Cobra. So he's he ticked all the boxes, though, Bryce Hall.
You can't be saying things like that on such a big show. Certainly not now. It's just as well we're not live this week. But that is all for this week. We'll be back soon. Not making too much of a commitment. We'll be back soon with all the latest on the influencer boxing scene. Thank you for joining us, for watching, for listening, and until next time, do take care.